Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine Bennis podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 8, Episode 6, The Fatigues. Hello everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. Just chugging along here in this season. It's been a fun one so far. Banter. I'm just looking at my notes and I have banter written down, but I have nothing to banter about, at least in my notes. But I will tell you guys our trip to San Francisco was a great success, really fun. We got to spend some time with some dear friends, and also my son was able to get Steph Curry's autograph at the game. I wasn't able to go because I had to travel a little bit later in the day than the rest of my family, but my best friend went with my husband and my kids to the Warriors game, and my son had brought one of his Steph Curry basketball cards, and he got it signed. So yeah, I would say it was probably the best birthday he's ever had, which he said many times. So it was just an awesome trip and really, really fun. All right, why don't we just go ahead and get into this episode? The synopsis for The Fatigues is as follows. Elaine promotes a psycho from the mailroom she was planning to fire. Jerry is alarmed to find his girlfriend's mentor is dating Kenny Banya. George fails an eye test after hearing that blind people can get any book on tape. Kramer gets Frank Costanza to help him cater dinner for a Jewish singles night. This episode was written by Greg Cavett and Andy Robin. All right, we start out in a restaurant. Jerry's on a date. She's talking about some career moves she has recently made due to her mentor, the advice of her mentor. Jerry needs some clarification. You mean your boss? No, she says that her mentor is a successful businesswoman who guides her in her career, and I'm her protege. She asks Jerry, well, you must have someone like that. Well, I like Gabe Kaplan, Jerry says. I don't really get that joke. I know Gabe Kaplan played Mr. Cotta on that show. I don't really know that show either. But anyway, I don't really get the joke, but I get to laugh. The actress in this scene is AJ Langer, and she plays Abby, Jerry's girlfriend for the episode. I know her best as Rayanne from My So-Called Life, one of my favorite shows as a teenager and probably of all time. It did not last very long, but holy crap, was I obsessed with that show. Everything about that show was great, but obviously, I think it was Jared Leto playing Jordan Catalano. I mean, oh my God. I couldn't concentrate when that show was on. Jared Leto, I felt everything Angela Chase's character felt, or it wasn't Angela Chase was the character, Claire Danes played her. But oh my gosh, like what perfect casting of just the most beautiful guy ever to be the subject of the crush. I mean, I just can't even, I think about scenes from it, like they'll just pop in my head, and I still get that like butterfly feeling that I would get when I watched it back in like 1995, 1996. There's a scene and someone posted it on, I think, TikTok or Instagram, whatever, these like 90s, 80s nostalgia pages that, I mean, they just speak to me, obviously. But anyway, it's the scene where Jordan finally openly admits that he's dating Angela's character, and they walk down the hallway and he grabs her hand in front of everyone, and there's this song playing in the background and it's like in slow motion. I mean, to this day I still get chills. Anyway, I totally went off on this tangent, but My So-Called Life, love that show. So anyway, that's where I know AJ Langer from, and I remember seeing this episode of Seinfeld and being like, I mean, so shocked because she played such a different character on My So-Called Life. I mean, she basically plays like a troubled teen who is an alcoholic and has like this screwed up life. And I mean, it couldn't be more opposite than Abby, which just goes to show she's a great actress. Speaking of acting, though, she doesn't seem to be acting anymore because she is literally royalty. She's a countess, the Countess of Devon, since she married an earl, which I found super interesting. She did also star in a short-lived sitcom by Seinfeld writer Peter Melman called It's Like You Know. Another thing I learned, she also suffers from fibromyalgia and is a very vocal supporter and the face of fibromyalgia awareness. And I think she gives a very good performance in this episode. She gives life to the Abby character, and I enjoy her choices. It's not a super comedic character, but AJ Langer does a good job bringing some comedy to it. Her reactions are really great. I think she plays off of Jerry very well. All right, next we are in Jerry's apartment. George is having the hardest time understanding what a mentor does, despite Jerry's very clear explanations. And basically, George is like, if you don't get paid, he doesn't understand what the hell's in it for the mentor. And George asks if he can get some reading done at Jerry's apartment. He can't concentrate at his place. He's reading a textbook on risk management since Steinbrenner wants everyone at the office to speak on their area of expertise. And Jerry's like, why do they think you're an expert on risk management? I guess it's on my resume. Jerry gets a call from Elaine, but, well, not quite yet. He has to hold for Elaine Bennis. I love Jerry's reaction. He's like, come on. Uh-oh. George realizes he can't read a book because of books on tape. He loves books on tape, and he needs another voice, not his own voice when he reads a book. He hates his voice. So Jerry's like, get this one on tape. I can't. It's a textbook. Finally, Elaine gets on the call and asks Jerry about this Bob Sacamano party. And he's like, yeah, it was 3 nights ago. What? She said, I just got the invitation. Oh, I was so excited to go. It's really a beautiful invitation. Oh, it was a lovely affair. She notices the postmark is 3 weeks old. Ugh, this happens all the time. She asks her assistant who runs the mailroom. Her assistant says, Eddie Sherman. Elaine asks for him to come up to her office. Well, Jerry gets excited. You're going to do some yelling? She says, I'm going to do some firing. So cool. Can you keep me on the phone? Oh, yeah, sure. Then Elaine hangs up. Give me a break. Jerry hangs up and notices that George has already dozed off on his couch. He throws, I think, what's a pistachio at his face and hits him in the glasses, and he wakes up. Oh, so good. My take on this scene, it's so funny to me how excited Elaine is about a Bob Sacamano party. These mysterious friends, and they're usually Kramer's friends, they're so funny to me. They always amuse me. We always hear like the same names over and over. We've heard Bob Sacamano many times. And this one kind of comes out of nowhere since, I don't know, you always just think of Bob Sacamano as Kramer's friend. And the smattering of information we've learned about him to this point doesn't make him sound like he'd have a lovely affair of a party with a beautiful invitation. So I just thought that was really funny. A nice touch to kind of do a little twist on Bob Sacamano's character. The whole runner of please hold for Elaine Bennis is so great because Jerry's reactions is what makes it hilarious. He's just like, are you kidding me? I mean, Elaine is like, call Jerry Seinfeld, please, and don't put me through right away. I mean, literally, she's probably just sitting there like opening her mail. She's like, not really ready to get on the call yet. So this scene really sets up Elaine's plot going forward, dealing with the mailroom guy, Eddie Sherman. And I did want to mention, I can completely relate to George here because I have to admit, audiobooks have kind of ruined me. I mean, during the pandemic, I listened, I don't even know how many, dozens of audiobooks when I went for my walks. Like I went for a walk every day. So I have the Audible app. I'm just like downloading books all the time. And yeah, I am currently trying to read a book like old school style, like sitting down and reading them with my eyes. And I've been on the same chapter of this book, I think for like a year. It's embarrassing, but audiobooks have ruined me. I would love to know what you guys think. If you listen to a book, can you say that you've read it? I don't say that. I don't know. I feel like it's cheating. I always say, well, I listened to a book, even though it's like, well, you're still getting all the information, but I don't know. I'm such a like stickler for details, I guess. I'm like, well, I didn't technically read it. I just listened to it. But what do you guys think? Do you have to say you read it or listen to it? Okay, next we are in Elaine's office. Her assistant tells her that Eddie Sherman has arrived, and in walks this guy in head-to-toe fatigues, all camo, with a brash attitude. You wanted to see me? Elaine, when she sees him, she immediately hesitates and is like, yes. She tells him that she's so sorry, but she's afraid that they're going to have to promote him. The actress in this scene who plays Elaine's assistant, Janine, is Gwen McGee. She's also appeared in Days of Our Lives, The Cosby Show, and Dharma and Greg. Not much to her her scene here, but I like her. I don't know. And for those of you who are maybe newer to the podcast, I always highlight the female guest stars on every episode just to, highlight all the females. This is about the female in the cast, Elaine Bennis. So I like to just take a moment and recognize all the female talent on the show. So even if they have as little as one line or two lines, I guess Gwen McGee has over the phone too, but I just want to acknowledge them. And yes, she does a fine job with her 2 lines. And then my take on the scene, super short scene, introduces Eddie Sherman. I wish there was a little bit more interaction here, but it also works just seeing him and the delivery of his one line. His whole demeanor is intimidating. So, it does totally work. I guess I'm being a little greedy. I would like to see more. And then the shift of Elaine's attitude is funny. It's all in her face. Elaine's not very good at her job here. It's like, come on, girl, you're the president. You don't have to take this shit. All right, next we're in Monks. Jerry asks, well, what did she do? Well, I called him all the way up to my office. I had to tell him something important, so I promoted him, she says into her coffee cup. What? She says he's a copywriter. He's writing copy? Well, it can't be any worse than the pointless drivel we normally churn out. Kramer enters and gives them both flyers for a Jewish singles night that he's heading up because his friend Lomez can't do it, and he wants both of them to be there. Elaine's like, I'm not Jewish. Well, neither am I, Kramer says. At the Knights of Columbus, apparently Frank Costanza hooked Kramer up with his lodge, and he's really counting on Jerry to go, get some buzz going. Jerry's like, I don't think so. He's like, no, Jerry, I'm doing all the cooking myself. Elaine starts chuckling, reading the flyer. She says, all amused, a tempting schmear of authentic Jewish delicacies. And Kramer gets in her face, do you like simmis? My take on this scene, JLD gets to show some fun range here. I like how embarrassed she is when she tells Jerry how she promoted Eddie Sherman. And then she's so irritated by the pointless drivel. I love the delivery of that line. She's like, come on, who cares? It's not a big deal. She knows that it's all crap at J. Peterman. And I think that's one of the best parts of her career there. And also, I noticed she's not necessarily regretful, but just so desperate. She's like, look, this is what I had to do. I had no other choice, even though it's like, I think you did, Elaine. And then with Kramer, the amusement with which she reads that ridiculous flyer. And then I love the way she smiles after he says, you like simmis? It's just this huge smile. I feel like she might be really laughing, but just a really fun performance by JLD in this scene. All right, next we are in a restaurant. Jerry and Abby are on another date. She mentions how the duck is so good there, but Jerry's like, nah, the skin looks too human. I just wanted to say really quick, duck doesn't come up as much as jackets on this show, but to have a couple instances where Jerry is in the position to say how much he doesn't want duck to eat is pretty interesting. It's like, what is with the duck? What is with the duck? Abby then notices that her mentor Cynthia just walked in, and she calls her over, introduces her to Jerry, and Cynthia mentions that her boyfriend, who's out parking the car, that Jerry might know him. He's a comic too. Kenny Banya. Banya? Of course, Jerry's just horrified. And then Banya enters, and he's so excited to see Jerry. The duck here is the best. The best, Jerry. The actress in this scene is Katie Lehman. She plays Cynthia. She's also appeared in Say Anything, Moonlighting, and Gilmore Girls. We got a Gilmore Girls Seinfeld connection. She played Ginger in the episode Like Mother, Like Daughter. She was one of the Chilton moms in the Booster Club with Lorelai. This is the episode where they throw the fashion show. Anyway, her performance in this show, she's fine in Gilmore Girls, if you were wondering, which I'm sure you were. But I don't know. I just feel like she makes odd choices. The cadence of her tone and her voice, maybe she's just trying to be like this no-nonsense businesswoman. But it's like, it's very robotic. Especially, I kind of did it when I went over the scene, but like, Kenny Banya. Like, it's a little puzzling to me. Because I don't think in the rest of the episode she delivers anything like that, but it's not bad. It's just kind of odd. Oh, and then we lost Katie Lehman, unfortunately. She passed away in 2014. All right, next we're on the subway. George is sitting next to a blind man who's listening to a textbook on tape, he notices, and he asks him where he got it. And he says, reading for the blind. You can get anything on tape. And George tells him how he's hooked on these books on tape. And the guy says, tell me about it. These things have ruined me for Braille. So I love this scene. It's so short. I love this interaction. The delivery of tell me about it. These things have ruined me for Braille. It's so short and sweet. But here's another example. I've talked about this on the show before. Just because you might have this bit part, like one or two lines, you can be memorable. And for me, this guy is so memorable. I did also learn that this actor is truly blind. He lost his sight after he was shot in the head in 1978, which is pretty incredible. So I just love this scene. It always makes me laugh. All right, next we are in Jerry's apartment. George is telling Jerry how he just has to fail an eye test and then he'll be swinging to the sweet sounds of risk management. And Jerry tells him how he met the mentor. Ooh, George is excited. What's she like? Jerry says she's dating Banya. Banya? Jerry says how he had to spend 2 hours at dinner with that specimen. And George asks what he had. Chicken. How can Abby look up to a person who voluntarily spends time with Banya? Marcella? Piccata. If anything, Jerry thinks he should be dating the mentor and Banya should be setting up pins at a bowling alley. Well, George needs to go to fail his eye test. He opens the door, but sees Frank exiting from Kramer's place, both smoking on cigars. Frank is really bothered when he sees George because he's wearing sweats. What is this, an athletic sweatsuit? Frank is there to pick up the check for the singles mixer, the Knights of Columbus Lodge, and Kramer is so excited because they already got 183 responses. It's going to be a rager. Jerry's like, how are you going to cook that much food? Oh, you're right. That's a lot of pupkits. He asks Frank if he knows anyone who could help with the cooking, but then Frank just freaks out. Cook? No, I don't know any cooks. I don't know anything about cooking. And he exits. Kramer and Jerry are like, what the hell just happened? George knows. He explains how when he was in the Korean War, he was a cook. Something very bad happened, and he hasn't cooked since. Oh, shell-shocked? Oh, yeah, but that has nothing to do with it. All right, next we're in Elaine's office. Elaine has the copywriting staff in there, and she says, great work, and dismisses them. But then Eddie stops them and says, you didn't ask for my ideas. Oh, well, she says, it's your first day. He says, I'm ready. Oh, okay. So he starts in on what he wrote. It's a hot night. The mind races. You think about your knife. The only friend who hasn't betrayed you. The only friend who won't be dead by sunup. Sleep tight, mates, in your quilted chambray nightshirts. Then he looks up at Elaine, whose eyes are just huge, and she's terrified. My take on this scene, great face acting here by JLD, but I really just have to call out the performance of Ned Bellamy, who plays Eddie Sherman. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, his performance as Eddie Sherman is so good. The blank look in his eyes, the voice, it just all works so well. And he's like the right level of menacing for Elaine to deal with. And that's something, I always say this with really kind of specific types of characters where it would be so easy in the hands of a lesser talented actor to maybe go a little overboard with it or just like, really lean into all of those characteristics versus kind of holding back a little bit and just being that perfect level of it. And this is an example of that. I think he does such a great job where it's like he's got that persona that's just kind of off-putting and a little bit scary. But I like how he's like, you didn't ask for my ideas. Like he's like, it's truly offended and kind of hurt by it. But it never gets to the point where you're just like, oh my God, let's run away from him. And it's such brilliant writing here. Just the product being quilted chambray nightshirts. It's just the perfect punchline to his terrifying catalog blurb. And there's something about the way he says chambray to me. It's so funny and just bravo. Ned Bellamy, brilliant performance. All right, next we're in Monks. Oh, Elaine is telling Jerry how Eddie is a disaster. Well, Jerry says maybe it's time for another promotion if he's doing so bad. Elaine likes this idea. You know what? You're exactly right. That is what I'm going to do. I should promote him. That way he'll be in another office on another floor and he can just sit there with his nice title and his bayonet and stop freaking me out. My take on this scene, just kind of moving the plot along here. Elaine just making more terrible decisions about Eddie Sherman's career path at J. Peterman. All right, next we're at the eye doctor and George is just throwing this eye exam, basically saying he can see nothing. The doctor tells him, well, George, I'm afraid your vision is quite impaired. He gives him an insurance form to sign, hands him a pen, but George reaches for the doctor's face. And he also tells the doctor that he's a very handsome man, by the way. The doctor really doesn't know how to take this compliment from who he thinks is a blind man. I don't know, though. Like, is the joke also that this doctor looks a lot like George? So George is sort of complimenting himself? I don't know. Something to think about. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. Jerry walks in. What the hell's going on here? And he's referring to all these pots on the stove and the kitchen's a mess, all this equipment everywhere. And we hear this kind of yelling and screaming, getting closer and closer. Finally, Kramer runs in with a hot strainer and drops it in Jerry's sink. Jerry's like, what are you doing? He says he has 3 kitchens going, Jerry's, Newman's, Mrs. Amfino's. He tells Jerry to try some of this kreplach that he made. I don't want to, Jerry says. Eat, your skin and bones. Something we say in my house a lot. Jerry takes a small bite and says, oh, this is awful. And Kramer tries it and immediately spits it out. Didn't you follow the recipe? Kramer says, well, the recipe was for 4 to 6 people. I had to multiply it for 183 people. I guess I got confused. Another thing we say in my house a lot, if something's confusing. Oh, yeah. If you're with us at our house, I mean, at least, I'm not even exaggerating. At least a dozen times a day, we're making some sort of Seinfeld reference. I'm sure it's really a pleasure for people to be around us. Jerry adds that, it tastes like dirt. Well, I also dropped it on the way over here. Kramer says he needs to talk to Frank. He has no skills. Jerry's like, you can't talk to him. No, I have to talk to him. Abby enters and says, I think there's a dead animal in the elevator. Oh, my stuffed cabbage. Kramer exits. Abby is so excited. Such a great dinner last night. It was all right, Jerry says. She tells Jerry that she told Cynthia they'd double with her and Kenny and then catch his act. No, that's it. Jerry can't take that. No, Banya. She's like, what are you talking about? Tells Abby about his 12-minute bit about Ovaltine. Calls him a hack. Cynthia would not date a hack. Would, does, is. All right, next we're in Elaine's office. She tells the copywriting staff she's happy to report that Eddie Sherman no longer writes for the catalog. Oh, they're all super relieved. She goes on to say, yeah, I made him head of corporate development. Well, Dugan is incensed. You promoted him? Elaine's like, well, no, not really. I bust my hump every day. As far as Dugan's concerned, she and her deranged protege can run the catalog by themselves. And then he quits and the rest of the group follows. Elaine just tries to stop them by saying, hey, multiple times. My take, it's a fun scene. Dugan, as always, makes me laugh. Not much to JLD here, but this just moves the story along. And now she has no copywriters for the catalog. All right, next we are in George's office. George starts the textbook on tape. Unfortunately, the voice on the tape sounds just like his own voice. And he's so pissed. This guy sounds just like me. This is horrible. Stop! Then he violently turns off the tape. All right, next we're in the Costanza's house. Kramer is there asking Frank about the war. And after a shot of Hennigan's, Frank tells the story about how he served some tainted beef to his unit. That sounds a lot dirtier than I thought it was when I wrote it. Oh my goodness. Okay, well, you guys get you get. All right, sorry. I'm 12 years old. And that he sent 16 of his men to the latrines that night with food poisoning. They were just boys. We also see this very dramatic flashback where Frank looks alarmingly the same age. I thought that was funny. It's like, yeah, okay, they could have cast someone who looked younger, like a younger version of Frank, but it's like, let's just make it funnier and have Frank look exactly the same. Anyway, we see, what he's talking about, guys retching, throwing up into their hats. And so then back to the present, Kramer tries to convince him, that was a long time ago. You were a boy too. And that to cook for 200 Jewish singles who need him, this might be the chance for him to make it right again. And Frank says, never, I'll never cook again. And tells Kramer to get out of my house. Next, we're at Jerry's apartment. Abby is on the couch looking shell-shocked, in fact. So you saw Banya's act. Apparently, after 2 minutes of the Ovaltine routine, she could not take it anymore. I told you, Jerry said. It's like being hit with a bag of oranges. Anyway, she and Cynthia got in a big fight, and Abby thinks it's over. No more mentor? Seems that way. Jerry says, well, at least they're on the right track now. Well, Abby's not so sure. She actually thinks they should take a break. Why? He asks. Well, she's feeling very disoriented. It's strange for her not to have an advisor. And Jerry's like, well, I can tell you what to do. It's more than that. I can tell you what to think. I need someone I can trust. Oh. Nope, Jerry can't do that. George bursts in saying he's in real trouble. The tapes are worthless. And Jerry's like, hello, kind of in the middle of something. George notices that Abby's there. He's like, all right. He just sits on the couch. Abby's like, you know what? I'm going to go anyway. And Jerry says, I can't believe you feel you really need a mentor. She says, I just need someone who can give me some kind of direction. And she exits. Well, George follows after her. What's your problem? No problem, he says, and he goes after Abby. Next, we're in Elaine's office. Well, Eddie's all she's got, so she and Eddie are working on the catalog. And he says, I think I got something here. Elaine's a little scared to hear it, but it's for the Bengalese galoshes. It's tough keeping your feet dry when you're kicking in a skull. And he looks up at her. She says, you know, that may be a tad harsh for women's wear. And he tells her, well, I'm not married to it. Oh, well, in that case, she says, why don't we take the phrase kicking in a skull and tweak it just a hair to something like strolling through a dewy meadow. He kind of repeats that and considers it. Dewy meadow. My take on this scene, we see how Elaine is trying to solve this predicament. She brought Eddie back to help her with the copywriting. Again, great performance by Ned Bellamy. I mean, that just kind of goes without saying. Just trust that I love everything he does. You know, and one of the things he does is something about the way he looks up at her after he reads those terrifying passages. Like, he just kind of pauses and he's like, it's just like this really abrupt, like, look up at her with this blank look in his eyes. Ugh. And I love the way JLD struggles to say kicking in a skull. And we see this first breakthrough of how they're going to get through this, tweaking his words to something that's more J. Peterman acceptable. All right, next we are at the Costanzas. Yay, we get to see Estelle. She serves Frank an omelet, and he tells her it's dry. Well, that's how I always make it. Well, it sucks. What did you say? And Frank lets her have it. Her meatloaf is mushy, salmon croquettes are oily, and that her eggplant parmesan is a disgrace to this house. Well, that's too bad, because I'm the only one who cooks around here. I say this in my house all the time. Frank says, not anymore. And he goes to the stove, cracks an egg into the pan, and declares, I'm back, baby. All right, next we're in George's office. Abby is there, just so eager to get going as George is her mentor. She asks, are you going to have time with your busy schedule to take on a protege? And he's like, I'll make the time. This is really important. And then he ropes her into reading his textbook about risk management. And let's see if you can explain it to me. All right, next we're on the street. Banya is walking down looking sad. And he runs into Jerry, tells him that the mentor broke up with him after seeing his act. And he says, maybe she's right. Maybe I am a total hack. I'm the worst, Jerry. The worst. Jerry suggests, maybe you stop all your bits with milk. Bosco, the Nestle's Quick, by the time you get to Ovaltine. And Banya interrupts, you think you can help me with my material? All right, next we're at Kramer's door. Frank arrives and knocks on his door. Kramer answers, you still need a cook? Oh, yeah. You got teeth, Val? No, Kelphalon. No, follow me. So Frank is back, baby. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. Jerry and Banya are working on Banya's material. Jerry hands him a pad of paper and Banya reads, why do they call it Ovaltine? The mug is round. The jar is round. They should call it Roundtine. Banya loves it. That's gold, Jerry, gold. All right, next we're in Elaine's office, and she and Eddie are really cooking now with the catalog. She says, all right, let's just replace hail of shrapnel and scar tissue with string of pearls and raspberry scones. Eddie seems to like that. Subtle reaction, but he's just kind of like, all right. My take, it's a super quick scene, obviously, but this is also a part of this kind of mentoring montage. We see George with Abby, Frank with Kramer, Jerry and Banya, and now Elaine and Eddie. And it's just such fun and clever writing. I talked about the concept of game of the plot, where it's like you have your game and all you have to do is just write around it. You know the elements that you need. So here it's like, okay, Elaine finding ways to take Eddie's what she calls psychotic imagery and replace it with the most flowery language. It's just so well done. What a fun thing to write. And they did a great job with it. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. Jerry is horrified to hear that George is Abby's mentor. Yeah, isn't it great? He's like, what is he teaching you? How to calculate 5% of a restaurant check? Abby accuses him of having no respect for the mentor-protege relationship. Well, Jerry defends himself by saying how he's taken on the role of mentor, helping Kenny Banya. She says, Banya? Abby says, you know what? I don't know if I want to date a mentor whose protege is a hack. Well, fine. Jerry says he doesn't want to date a protege whose mentor is a Costanza. More great writing. All right, next we're in Monks. Elaine and Eddie are celebrating with milkshakes. She says, I don't know what it is. It's chemistry between us, but we put out one hell of a catalog. And his response, cool. Elaine feels now comfortable enough to ask him about the fatigues and the psychotic imagery. He says he really doesn't want to talk about it. Oh, come on. Don't be a BB. Fine, he says that, he was seeing a woman, thought that she really liked him, but then things kind of cooled off. That's it, she says. He tells her, well, it's tough to meet someone you like, much less someone Jewish. Ooh, a light bulb goes off for Elaine. My take on this scene, I really like it. We've been on such a journey with Elaine and Eddie in this episode. She's so much more relaxed with him, and well, he's the same, but I like that. I like this unlikely chemistry and friendship between the two of them. And the part where she's like, don't be a BB always makes me laugh. And the dating thing definitely takes you by surprise. And this is what I love. I love the unexpected response. Like you would think, okay, he's got some war story or whatever. But the fact that it's just like, well, I was dumped. She's like, what? Super funny twist. All right, next we are at the Knights of Columbus. The raging Jewish singles mixer is happening. Jerry and Elaine are raving about the food. Have you tried the hamantashen? Elaine says, I can't get off the kishkas. Kenny comes up to Jerry. He stopped by to thank him for the risk management material. It's gold, Jerry. Risk management? Jerry's so confused. Kenny says he booked a bunch of corporate gigs and Cynthia even took him back. And we see Cynthia talking to Eddie Sherman on the other side of the room. She says, you went from the mailroom to the head of corporate development in 2 days. And then she offers Eddie double to work for her. We see Kramer and Frank at the buffet, and Frank is so happy. He feels like a phoenix rising from Arizona. And we hear Elaine getting upset. She can't believe Eddie's quitting. He says, I can't churn out that pointless drivel anymore. She grabs his arm. You can't quit. You're all I've got. She grabs his jacket really forcefully and says, I need you. Well, that grab causes him to start coughing and choking. Frank looks over and sees Eddie, a man in fatigues, coughing, and it triggers his trauma from the Korean War. So he freaks out and tells everyone to stop eating, bad, and he's flipping their plates, and he goes over to the buffet table and flips the entire table. There's a tag to the episode where George is at that Yankee event where he has to speak. He gets introduced by Wilhelm and says, he'll be speaking to us about risk management. George gets up there and opens his folder. It's all about Ovaltine. George pauses, not sure what the hell is going on. You ever drink this stuff? Why do they call it Ovaltine? He flips through the pages wondering, is this going to keep going? And Wilhelm turns to the guy next to him, so proud. He's my protege. My take on the other scene where Elaine's in it, just such a great ending to the episode. Really fun dovetailing. They really kind of converge all these storylines together. I love that. I do think Elaine, the get out shove instead of pulling the lapels of his jacket would have been better for Eddie Sherman, but oh well. I mean, it's not much to say. Fun ending all around. All right, I'm going to take a quick break, and I will see you on the other side.
It's funny. I know the world knows my father as this incredible business mogul, disruptor, and, skilled pilot, but I just knew him as my dad, and I miss him every day.
Eddie Sherman, one of the most prolific figures in modern times. From his humble beginnings to his unprecedented dominance in fashion and finance, he led a very private life. Not a lot has been revealed about this icon until now. Tubi Documentaries presents an in-depth look at one of the top minds the world has ever seen in Churning, the Eddie Sherman story. This 4-part series features interviews from Eddie's old colleagues, his 2 daughters, and his partner in life and business, Cynthia Banya. When I met Eddie, it was totally by chance. Our eyes met across this lodge at the Knights of Columbus. I was actually there with my first husband. After that night, we became business colleagues, and everything just grew from there. He was my soulmate in business and eventually in pleasure. Churning, the Eddie Sherman story, starts at the beginning. A self-described military brat, Eddie struggled to find where he fit in. After flunking out of high school, Eddie took the first job he could find, working in the mailroom of a prominent clothing company. It was there his performance was recognized by none other than the president of the company, and his meteoric rise began. I worked with him in the mailroom, and I remember that day he was called up to that head lady's office. Personally, I thought he was going to get fired since look, I know he's a big shot legend now, but let's just say that mailroom science wasn't his forte. I mean, sorting the mail really threw him off. But she must have seen something no one else did, because the rest is history. From rags to multi-billionaire riches, Churning, the Eddie Sherman story, goes deep into the psyche of the reclusive genius, disrupting the catalog clothing industry with more inclusive blurbs, to his invention of Roundteen, the chocolate powder in a round jar. His empire was unstoppable. That is, until a freak accident took his life. Strolling through a dewy meadow one morning on his sprawling property in Montana, Eddie tripped and choked on the raspberry scone he was eating. He was found hours later by his daughter Abby. Dad was so scared of choking. I never knew why. He'd only say that something very bad happened the night he met Mom. Anyway, it just breaks my heart that his biggest fear is what took him from us. A tale of turmoil, triumph, and tragedy. Churning, the Eddie Sherman story is a must-watch. Only on Tubi. All right, and we're back. Well, in the extras, nothing was very compelling that I wanted to include, and we're actually sackless this episode. Greg wasn't able to send in any thoughts, which is fine. He'll be back soon. So let's move on to my favorite Elaine moments. I love the way she says, kicking in a skull. JLD, she's such a master at those moments of trying to keep it together, but no, this is affecting her, and the way she manipulates her voice, and even her eye kind of blinks when she says it. I just love all around that performance. And a close second is "Don't Be a Baby." Love it. And my final notes for the episode, this is really fun. I like how JLD is paired up with a non-regular cast member for her plot. And it's even better because Ned Bellamy is such a strong, brilliant actor. Just like Eddie and Elaine had chemistry for the catalog, JLD and Ned Bellamy had fantastic chemistry working together. He played off her well and vice versa. So I just think it's not very common. I mean, usually they kind of pair up the main characters to work together, but I like when they bring in someone totally new and we get to enjoy a brilliant performance by someone we've never seen before and won't see again. I mean, and in the show, obviously. Ned Bellamy had a successful career after this. For a scene swap idea, I wouldn't have minded a little bit less Abby and some more Eddie. Something that was sort of missing for me. I would have loved a scene of Eddie as the head of corporate development, or maybe even a scene of him working under Cynthia, which, I mean, I do love the tag of George doing the Ovaltine speech. But I don't know, maybe the tag should have been Cynthia and Eddie working together and her being like, what? She just kind of realizes, okay, this guy doesn't really deserve to be here. Seinfeld episodes always work the best, in my opinion, when those plots converge, and they all did very well in this episode. And that sort of through line of mentoring relationships across the cast, it was such a nice touch. So I've talked about this before, but a lot of times when the plots for the main four kind of operate in their own silos, it's not as funny. It's not that it's awful, but it's just a better result when everything kind of comes together. They all interact with each other. And this is a great episode to exemplify that. So it's like they all have their own stuff going on, but they all kind of at different points in the episode, they're all coming together and connecting and discussing things, and everyone knows what's going on in each other's lives. And then at the end, we see it all coming together. And that's just always the perfect recipe for a fantastic Seinfeld episode. JLD has some really fun moments, but a lot of the comedy here comes from Eddie Sherman. But I think her reactions, a lot of great face acting, and like I said, those moments where she's trying not to look so horrified, but still has to kind of say things and get her point across. JLD is just a master at that. And I think that's all I can say about the fatigues. Please be sure to follow the podcast on social media. On Instagram, it's at Hot Heavy Elaine. TikTok at Elaine Bennis Podcast. And if you'd like to email me, please do at elainepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.